Headlines on the India development debate. Punjab National Bank discovers a fraud worth 11,400 crore rupees at one of its branches in Mumbai. In its complaint to the CBI, PNB accuses billionaire jewellery designer Nirav Modi of suspicious transactions worth 10,000 crores. The bank suspends 10 employees even as the government directs all lenders to clean up their books. PNB stock tanks 10%, posting its biggest fall in 2 years. Losses in PNB clubbed with RBI's revised norms for bad loan resolution dragged the PSU Bank Nifty down almost 5%. Nifty manages to hold on to 10,500. JSW Steel's bid for Monet Ispat is under the scanner. Creditors move to seek legal opinion given the close family connection between the promoters of both companies. Remember, the IBC bars errant promoters and related parties from reacquiring bad assets. India will not be allowed to get away with levying high import duty on Harley-Davidson motorbikes, says Donald Trump, pitching for a reciprocal tax on countries that abuse trade relations with the US. Trump says the import tax was an example of unfair trade practices. A day after Owaisi stirred a massive controversy by his remarks on Muslim soldiers, Indian Army hits back. General Officer Commanding-in-Chief Devraj Anbu says the army does not communalize martyrs and those making statements don't know the army well enough. And it's an all-out war on Twitter over WhatsApp's foray into the Indian payment space, accusing Facebook of misusing the UPI platform. Paytm's Vijay Shekhar Sharma says Facebook is killing the open UPI system with its custom closed garden implementation. Good evening. This is the India development debate. The country's second largest public sector lender, Punjab National Bank, today notified fraudulent transactions to the tune of 11,400 crore rupees. That's about 30% of the bank's market cap. The disclosure has created ripples across the banking space, eroding the credibility of the bank and stoking concerns of poor governance across state-owned banks. This comes, remember, days after India's largest bank, the State Bank of India, reported its first quarterly loss in 17 years as it disclosed that it had severely underreported bad loans and overreported profits. In fact, it appears the NPA crisis is far from over and the worst may not be behind us just yet. The new diktat by RBI for NPA resolution is yet another bitter pill that is being administered on Indian banks. Will this fix the mess? Could it do more damage in the short term than good in the long term? And who is to blame for India's colossal NPA mess? That's the topic for discussion tonight on the India development debate right here on ET Now. I'm Sandeep Gurumurthy joining you live from our news center here in New Delhi. And before we take it to our special panel to debate the state of banks, let's toss it across to my colleague Ruchi Bhatia, who's joining us with the PNB mess, the $1.7 billion fraud that has been detected and the implications of that.
India's second largest lender is mired in a big fraud, and it could very well be just the tip of the iceberg. PNB, in an exchange filing, reported fraud transactions of close to $1.8 billion. And at the heart of course, this is billionaire jeweler Nirav Modi. The case, in fact, dates back to 2011, and the branch in question here is a branch in Mumbai. So what really happened? There were letters of understandings that were issued and loans were sanctioned in foreign branches of Axis Bank and Allahabad Bank. What are these letters of understandings? Letters of understandings are usually issued by the banks. They act as a guarantee, and it can only be issued if a borrower deposits the same amount with the bank, and this has to be approved and given a go-ahead by the credit committee. In fact, it seems that here the employees in question issued the letter of understandings without any proper sanction. In fact, they even lied about it. What was the modus operandi? Now, Nirav Modi had to make payments to his suppliers, and buyers' credits were needed to make these payments. Now, there were three firms in questions: Diamond R Us, Solar Exports and Stellar Diamonds, and here the due diligence was not really followed. This of course opens a Pandora's box. There are a lot of concerns, and that was exactly the reason why we saw the PNB stock taking a massive hit in trade today. This $1.8 billion fraud is almost close to 1/3 of PNB's market capitalization. And at a time when the RBI is looking in a big way at the asset quality review, this has opened big concerns, especially on asset quality. There are big worries on that front, and this would also mean that if this if this case turns into NPA, the bank would need higher provisioning. This, as we told you, also opens a Pandora's box, because these employees have been working from 2011 up until now, and this would mean certain more nefarious activities that could have happened in the bank. But the government is, of course, now putting a brave front. They've swung into action. They are saying that this is they've become more vigilant. They've asked all banks and all other PSU banks to look into it. In fact, along with RBI, they're also tightening the noose around any fraudulent transaction. The government is using all tools available and has even put top enforcement agencies like the CBI and ED into action.
Let's take it straight to the power-packed panel that we've got for you this evening. Maithili Busturmat, consulting editor, ET Now, and our in-house banking expert, Anand Narayan, money market expert, joins us as well. Hemendra Hazari, banking expert who doesn't mince his words, also joins us on the show this evening. Syed Zafar Islam, spokesperson of the BJP, and Mohammad Khan, spokesperson of the Congress, because we don't want to make this a technical debate. This is as much a political debate as it's an economy debate. Maithili, let me start with you. What's going on with Indian banks? What is the state of Indian banks? I mean, PNB today says it detected fraudulent and unauthorized transactions worth $1.7 billion from a single branch. And this comes just days after SBI reported its first quarterly loss in 17 years. And the bank says that it had failed to disclose $3.6 billion in additional bad loans in the year 2017. And that it had overstated its profits to the tune of over 3,700 crores in FY17. What's going on as far as Indian public sector banks are concerned?
Well, Sandeep, contrary to what the world at large believes, India does not have the highest share of NPAs. In fact, the Western countries like Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Spain, they have much higher percentage of NPAs to the total assets. But this is not a justification for the high level of NPAs. So having said that, I think one must distinguish between what happened in case of PNB, which is an outright fraud, and what is happening with the banking sector at large. And allow me to take a minute or so to discuss this, because this is, frankly, more an economic and technical debate point than a political point. All businesses will have their ups and downs. Now, whether a business is going through a temporary bad patch and whether it needs a bit of hand holding and for how long is a commercial decision which only the lender who understands the business of the borrower best should be in a position to take. Now, by the RBI tightening the rules regarding NPA recognition much more than even the Bank of International Settlements. Remember, Bank of International Settlements is a global central bank, as it were. And that has a definition of an NPA as 90 days overdue. Now, the Reserve Bank has got a much tighter definition than even the BIS. In the process, the provisions that the banks will have to make, and these are primarily public sector banks, shoots up. As a result, their profits will come down or their losses will increase. Ultimately, recapitalization will have to be done with taxpayer money. So, the argument that we are trying to fix the promoters, fix the NPAs and try to protect taxpayers is completely mistaken. So, I think one needs to take a more nuanced stance of it. RBI in the process has really shot us in the foot, because by insisting that banks to recognize the bad loan much faster, have a very rigid time frame, and thereby make provisions, ultimately it is taxpayer only who picks up the can.
Sure. Maithili,
with that, I'll stop here.
Maithili, fair enough, and we will debate the RBI provisions on NPA. Is it going to do more good, more bad than good? Is a fair point, and we will debate that later in the show. But you know, I agree. I take your point that it's not fair to mix the PNB fraud with the NPA issue. But the reason I'm connecting the two is it indicates the quality of governance as far as Indian public sector banks are concerned, and that is why I'm trying to draw a link, if there is one. Hemendra Hazari, comment on that. Is it what do you conclude from the quality of governance? Because this is from one branch in Mumbai, $1.17 billion fraud. I understand it's a fraud, but from one branch in Mumbai. And can we today assume that it's restricted to this one branch of this one bank, or could this just be a tip in the iceberg?
See, it's very clear that there has been a severe collapse of controls in PNB's branch in Mumbai which, where these transactions did occur. Now, why such, banks are known to have controls, internal controls, external controls, they are branch auditors, they are internal auditors from the central office, plus there's an external auditor. So the question is, how did all these transactions happen without any of these, the checking people, flagging it off as a red flag? Now, let me also tell you, there is this misconception always that the PSU corporate governance is terrible. In PSU, at least it gets disclosed. When there is such frauds happen, FIRs are filed, the Vigilance Commission gets involved. In new private sector banks, it's all hushed up. So just because nothing comes out from new private sector banks, let me assure you that doesn't mean it's not happening. I know of many cases where, some very serious problems have happened, but there is no disclosure at all. So this is the state basically of very poor corporate governance and transparency, both in the government sector as well as in the private sector. It is not only restricted to the public sector here.
Fair point. Comment on that, Anand Narayan. How alarmed were you by this report of this colossal fraud in PNB's one branch? And what are the chances that in this particular case, the bank could be holding collateral that could back these deals? I'm trying to understand, could this be a tip of the iceberg? Is there more? Could there be more to it? Or is this something that could be arrested and the damage in this case to PNB and to the banking sector at the large could be restricted?
Sandeep, the simple answer to that is I don't know. It's easy to castigate a bank or a particular branch. Clearly there's a problem. The headline of $1.7 billion is not small. As you said, it's a sizable part of PNB's market cap, and PNB is paying a price for that. You saw what happened to the stock today. But we simply don't know enough details as yet to figure out whether this is a bigger problem. Where is the issue? Is the issue at governance? Is the issue at controls? All of that will come out in the goodness of time. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait it out. And this is a new piece of item which has come out in the last couple of days. We just don't have enough information to talk about it in the public domain. I'm sure RBI is seized of this. I'm sure PNB itself at the highest levels and the government itself is completely seized of it and looking into it. It's coming at an unfortunate time because as Maithili was mentioning, we have this new restructuring circular which has come out for overall stress assets in the banking system. Now that is a known problem. I disagree with Maithili slightly in one respect, in that I think it's a part of a three-pronged strategy to resolve this mess once and for all. One is we had the banking, the bankruptcy code put in place. Second, we had the recapitalization of banks being done, at least partly. We might need more capital, but at least part of it was being addressed. And at the same time, you move towards ensuring that you make a clean breast of things and tell the world as it is. Every single analyst worth his or her salt has been saying there's a big problem of NPAs in banking, which is far more than what meets the eye. I can name any number of reports which have shown NPAs at 16%, whereas actually the numbers disclosed by the banks have been at 12%. So let's get the whole facts out. Let's put things out. Let's not have any more evergreening. Let's not have any more, SMA 2s which are magically become standard on the 90th day. Let's not have restructured assets which are actually not working out well and ought to be treated as NPAs.
Anand, I get that point, and like I told Maithili as well, this is something we will debate in great detail in just 10 minutes into the show. But I just want to address today's headline because, I know we tend to sort of, exaggerate things here in the media, and I don't want to do that. But yet this seems like a massive story. So let me take it to Syed Zafar Islam, who's joining us from the BJP. Syed, who should take the blame? Specifically, we'll come to the NPA crisis in a bit, and I'm sure you'll point fingers at the Congress, and there will be this political tutu-meh-meh. But before we get there, for this particular fraud in this particular case, you are yourself on the board of of a big PSU company like Air India. You understand governance in PSU companies. Who should take the blame? Is it just fair to blame 10 employees who may have perpetrated this fraud and put a CBI probe 6 years after this crime was perpetrated? Is that all that we can expect from the government?
I think it's too early for me to give any a specific response to this problem because this needs to be investigated, and I will have a a very informed response only once once I get to hear from the management of the bank or from the government. But as far as this problem is concerned, this is something which may not happen today, which must be going for long because the amount involved is very large. And I think this definitely have the support of the management. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been possible with this kind of fraudulent transaction so rampantly without the support of the blessing of the top management. So, but I will not comment at this stage purely because it needs to be investigated. And once investigations are in place and once we get to know all the details, then probably it will be easy for, or any of us will be able to, from the government side, will be able to speak on it in a very informed manner. But away from that, what the other discussion which we were having today about this, the windows which RBI used to provide all the banks to address the concern of all the states assets, I think it's a very smart move of RBI, and I think it was important because we know all along the NPA problem was purely because the bank management, it was primarily because of the inefficiency of the bank management of all the public sector banks, and they were simply hiding those NPA and somehow restructuring those assets and showing it as standard assets. But this move will definitely put to rest all this problem of NPA, and this will definitely, with bank has now been recapitalized, this issue will get resolved faster than all of us had anticipated.
Okay, will this put to rest the entire problem of NPA is what we're going to debate. That's the crux of this debate. But I want a quick reaction from Mohammad Khan because, the banking secretary has clarified that this specific PNB fraud was perpetrated not now, but in the year 2011 when the UPA was in power. So a quick reaction on the quality of governance and the quality of checks and balances. You can argue why did it take so long for it to be detected, but the fact is that this happened in 2011. Mohammad Khan.
Well, fair enough. See, Sandeep, the answer to a question as to whether there is a wrongdoing on record is simple. Investigate it. Bring to bear the harshest penalties the law has to offer. Please spare no action in this regard. What I want to talk about is, you said thrice that they will point a finger towards the Congress on the NPA problem. You cannot. You cannot lay the blame of the NPA problem at the Congress's doorstep any time after December 2015. Even if you adopt your 180-day standard of when a loan becomes a non-performing asset, you would have to bear in mind that there was a sharp jump in the years 2016 and 17, particularly in 2017 when it went from 3 lakh crores to 8 lakh crores. And according to many experts such as KC Chakrabarti Saab, the Deputy Director of the RBI, the number is much higher as per your own standards. So we have to take into account that several of these loans have been given after you came into power. And this is what surprises me. You say, and this is the data that's available in the public domain, that the largest loans are in the sectors of steel, infrastructure, and mining, right? All is well and good. Now, Arun Jaitley Saab has himself laid out a statement that in the last 3 years there's been an effective push by way of loans being given in these 3 sectors. I do know of the fact that 3 of the largest beneficiaries are Gujarat-based companies, SR, Adani, and the Anil Ambani-led Reliance. Now, how many of the loans given to those people account for these non-performing assets? By our estimate, it is 3 lakh crores. If the number is taken to be 8 lakh crores, as per the old standard, that would be around 40%. Now,
okay,
if
fair
this
enough.
is true, then what standards and policies were you following?
Okay,
and thereby the blame therefore lies at your doorstep.
Okay,
now,
Mohammad Khan,
you have come up with this RBI circular.
Okay,
Sandeep,
we'll come to the RBI circular in a bit. Mohammad Khan will come to the RBI circular in a bit. But frankly, if the Congress party were to tell anyone today that it's not responsible for the NPA mess, people will only laugh at that statement. But anyways, you've raised some questions. I'm going to let Syed Zafar Islam rebut, and then I'm going to go to Hemendra Hazari. Syed Zafar Islam, quick rebuttal to the points made by Mohammad Khan.
See, this NPA problem, it didn't happen today, because if you see the credit offtake since 2014 is abysmal. Definitely these loans was given by the bank prior to 2014, and this was restructured. All those loans was restructured. So for Mr. Khan's information, that these loans were restructured earlier and the repayment was scheduled after 2015. That's why you could see those numbers are jumping into after 2015, because those restructured loans have remained a non-performing asset. Because
I have the numbers on restructuring here as well, sir. 3.5 lakh crores is what you have restructured.
But let him complete.
But let me Khan, let me just let me just tell you two things. So these banks were, there were simply three problems banks were facing. First is the governance issue. Definitely, banks were, the way they were doing the credit evaluation, something which is certainly had a lot of flaws, and that is evident from the fact that they had compromised on many ways. Then they should have not compromised. So that was one. Secondly, whether with or without the with involvement of the management, those compromise was made. Secondly, the involvement of the senior political leaders, like for instance Sonia Gandhi's office or Rahul Gandhi's office, or for that matter Manmohan Singh's office or finance minister's office, and we have enough evidences in the public domain.
Sandeep, if he makes such absurd claims, then he's undermining his own point, and he's undermining the point he's trying to make.
Okay.
If loans go,
Syed Zafar Islam,
your tenure,
Syed Zafar Islam and Mohammad Khan, I'm going to interrupt you. Syed Zafar Islam and Mohammad, I don't want to give you a free run and make political allegations on each other. Fair enough. I take your point. Syed Zafar Islam, I take your point. Let me go to Hemendra Razari. I've got much ground to cover. Let me interrupt you. Syed Zafar Islam, let me interrupt you. Hemendra Razari, simple question to you, which is, let's draw it back to the substance of this debate. Can you, politicians will keep blaming each other. I don't want to make it a UPNDA issue, but can you deny the fact that banks have been lying about their asset quality? What else explains the fact that State Bank of India, under its new chairman Rajneesh Kumar, now discloses that there are $3.6 billion in additional bad loans? And this happens every time a new chairman takes charge of State Bank of India. Suddenly these NPAs emerge from thin air.
No, that is true. Normally in Indian banking, even in the private sector, you will find that when a new person does come, you will find that there is a massive cleanup. Now, in this whole debate, what is happening and who is to blame? Actually, for me, the BJP and Congress are two sides of the same coin. You have these huge NPAs today is because you have, and this has gone with the, the consensus in the capital market, with business media, and with both the Congress and the BJP. You have decided that reforms is the way out of and to deliver you high growth. Today, because you have privatized infrastructure, you have this problem of all these private infrastructure players who have gold-plated their projects and who now, because of the demand slowdown, have put their hands up. Now, if you did not have the reform process, the state, and globally it is the state which invests, and very rightly so, in infrastructure, the state would have put up these projects. Today, in effect, the exchequer has greater stake in these private sector infrastructure projects because of the debt equity ratios are so skewed. But we do not have ownership because the ownership is still with the private sector. My whole issue today is you cannot recapitalize your banking sector because you say because of reform you have fiscal consolidation, you always have to be very tight. Now, my point is the more you do fiscal consolidation, the more you deprive your banks of capital, the longer is going to be your problem, the longer the economic stagnation will continue. But sadly, mine is the minority view. Every business media editorial you read, any capital market analyst, or whether it is the Congress or the BJP, they all swear by reform. And the more, and any solution is privatized. Now, in a demand slowdown, the private sector is very reluctant to invest, and very rightly so. And the more you privatize, it is the state which has to pick up the lead, because it is only with the, with the exchequer money that you can play a counter-cyclical role. So my point is the more you start privatizing, the longer is going to be your economic stagnation and the larger is going to be your NPMS.
Maithili, comment on that. React to the point made there by Hemendra Razari. Two important points. He's saying on the nature of reforms that, that the politicians and business media want in the banking space, he's saying are counterproductive. And of course, he's raised a very valid point of gold plating of loans, which in many ways is the reason why we are in this colossal mess. Okay, I think we've lost the link with Maithili. Anand Narayan, you want to react to the 2 points made there by Hemendra Razari? I'll try and get the link back with Maithili.
Sure, Sandeep. So look, a couple of points. One is to the point you make about things coming out suddenly. I think it's been an elephant in the room for a long, long time. Every analyst worth his or her salt knows that there is a problem of NPAs in the country. It's been there not just today, it's been there for many years now. And because we didn't have a proper resolution mechanism, because we didn't know how to solve for the capital mess in banks, and because the stress assets remain stressed, it was something that we were kind of living by. And over a period of time, RBI has been trying to get better recognition of stressed assets coming out into the system. So we saw a variety of things coming over time, restructuring, 525s, SDRs, CDRs, and so on and so forth. Eventually, we also had the bankruptcy code which got passed, which I thought was a big step towards the right direction of at least trying to figure out if there's a way of resolving crisis and moving on rather than kicking the can down the road forever. So as I said in the beginning, right, the fact that you've got all three parts working out, the bankruptcy code which is now up and running, the fact that you've got the recapitalization of banks underway, that allows for better recognition of NPAs, which is what this particular circular is all about. And the number that will come out eventually over the next couple of quarters could be a large number, it could be pain, but it will not be something that serious investors will find surprising. People have known that there is a problem, that there is a restructured asset which ought to be NPAs, there's evergreening, all these things have happened. That's a reality, that's a real politic on the ground. Now, as far as infrastructure is concerned, see, a lot of the large assets which are currently in LCLT, and by the way, the only part of this equation which still hasn't been tested is the NCLT process. Recapitalization is happening, recognition is happening. We are now still putting all our eggs in the NCLT basket and hoping that stress assets get resolved through that process. We still haven't seen that happening. Hopefully it will happen over the next couple of weeks. Now, after all this actually happens, we still have to worry about how do we go about going forward, how do we, to the point made about infrastructure and privatization. I would only add one thing out here. A lot of the assets really aren't about infrastructure alone. SR Steel, for instance, isn't necessarily about infrastructure and government. And earlier, if you saw the first NDA government, I thought one very successful project was the Golden Quadrilateral. Now, that didn't involve the fisc. It actually involved public-private partnership. It didn't involve government spending alone. And it worked extremely well. I think everybody will agree that that particular project worked extremely well. Now, just because the process kind of broke down in 2008 to 2011 for a variety of reasons, doesn't mean that model is wrong. I think that model can still work, but obviously there are lots of lessons that we have to learn from the last experience.
Okay, Maithili, we've got the connection back with you. We lost your link. I wanted to react to the point made by Hemendra Hazari on the nature of reforms that we tend to expect from the government when it comes to the banking space, and also the other point on how suddenly every time a new chairman takes charge, out of thin air, bad loans get reported. What does that tell you about the quality of governance?
Well, it just tells you that each chairman is trying to protect his own skin, because this is true not only of State Bank of India, we've seen it of many public sector banks, that each time a new chairman comes, he wants to show the previous chairman in as poor light as possible so that there's no flack that comes onto him. So this is not unusual, this is not new. So I'm just going to dismiss it completely. As far as the problem about the NPA issue is concerned, I think we must distinguish, Sandeep, between a simple solution and a simplistic solution. The RBI circular is a simplistic solution, because let me just look at NPAs like a cancer on the economy, and the IBC, the NCLT, the bankruptcy code as something like chemotherapy. Now, everybody knows that chemo will kill good cells as well as bad cells. So every doctor never administers chemotherapy to a patient whose body is not in a position to take that chemo. So the RBI's basic problem is that you're administering chemotherapy regardless through the IBC. You're not distinguishing why an account has become an NPA. And let me repeat that NPAs are endemic to banking. Banking is the business of taking risks. No bank can ever lend with 100% completely good assets and zero NPAs unless you are like a particular bank which lends only to the housing sector, never gets his hands wet by lending to infrastructure or any risky assets, and you are 100% safe ground. But if you are in the business of banking, and banking means a business of taking risks, NPAs are endemic. They occur across the world. Now you have to decide, do you want to administer chemotherapy regardless of what state the patient is in, or do you want to look at a slightly more nuanced solution? In fact, the RBI solution reminds me of that famous, Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, what he said about the Red Queen, and please allow me to quote over here. He said, the Queen had only one way of settling all difficulties, great or small. Off with his head, she said, without ever looking around. This is exactly what the RBI has done, and we are going to get into much deeper trouble as a result of the Reserve Bank of India's inability to distinguish between one NPA and another, and tightening the screws at a time when the economy just will not be able to take that pain.
Okay, Maithili, as a provocative self, I have to take it to Syed Zafar Islam, who made the point that he believes this is the one, one notification that is going to solve India's NPA woes. So, Syed, you heard that from Maithili. She's saying you administered chemotherapy on an acute cancer patient. So, this is not going to cure him, but kill the patient.
Well, I do not agree with Maithili at all, but she should understand that this problem came into this magnitude purely because the bank management was hiding this problem, NPA problem. Had they been started reporting earlier, then probably this would have been a small problem. Nobody says that the NPA will not happen in the banking sector because they are taking risks. There will be some NPAs, and everybody understands that because the banks are taking risks. But the NPA of this magnitude, something which everyone knows purely because of certain reason, a specific reason, and that is something which RBI circular is trying to address. The reason is that all these windows which was available which was been provided by the RBI, all these windows of like 525, Anand said 525, SDR, CDR, all these mechanisms to resolve these NPA issues have been misused by the bank. Had they used it properly and efficiently, probably we wouldn't have had this problem. But it was misused by the bank management, something which I want to highlight, and at the insistence of the UPA government time and again. And that's why there is a report, I think everyone should read it. There is a report published by, I don't know who published it, but Debt Curse. And I think if you read that report, probably you will get to know how this entire issue got to that extent, purely because of the misuse, the bank management misused all these windows available with them. So today, by discarding SDR mechanism, or for that matter 525 and all the mechanisms and windows which were available, I think this issue will now start. The bank will start, first they will stop hiding it. Secondly, they will have to necessarily force to declare it or report to RBI. And third, this mechanism will help them to resolve the outstanding issues, NPA issues. And bank will have much cleaner balance sheet, because every man, as you rightly said, that all the bank management, what they want to show that their balance sheet is saund. Right. Well, even though the corporate balance sheet is in very poor shape, but they still bank wants to show their balance sheet is very strong, because they know that their tenure is 2 years, 3 years. And they also have to see that masters, unlike India government, we do not engage or involve in banking operation. The earlier government was engaging on a day-to-day basis, so they have to comply with the master's request.
Okay, you've raised 3 points which I will debate with our panel, Hemendra Hazari, Anand Narayan and Maithili Busturmat. But before I do that, it's only fair that I allow Mohammad Khan to come in and get a word in reaction to the criticism that you laid out in this comment, in a previous comment. And also, Mohammad Khan, do you believe that these new norms put out by the RBI, will this fundamentally solve the NPA problem, or do you agree with Maithili that they will do more harm than good?
I agree with Maithili ji that they will do more harm than good. I want to say very, very quick things on the 3 steps taken by them. First is the bankruptcy code. I have some experience with this bankruptcy code. I am currently representing parties involved in such proceedings. Let me tell you, they are very similar to the proceedings of winding up that were there earlier. You've just replaced the official liquidator that the High Court used to appoint with the IRP, the interim resolution professional. Now, I fail to see what the difference is. You've just moved it to a different forum, the NCLT. I don't know what will be the return, but it has to be seen at least a year in. It doesn't seem encouraging so far. Number 2, this RBI circular makes the workings for company much more restrictive. Maithili ji is absolutely right. Off with their head. It has a very, very narrow way of looking at loans, that jaise diya waise hi wapas lene lago. You have to lay out a long structured time plan. Number 3, recapitalization. I was under the impression that you got 16 lakh crores back into banks as a result of demonetization. Isn't that your attempt at recapitalization? If it was, then please tell us how the money is being spent. I will not respond to Zafar Islam's rudimentary understanding of how NPAs function. The fact is, if they are going bad under your watch, it means you are doing something wrong. If you're saying the management under the previous banks was bad, then surely for the last 3 years at least, you must take certain amount of responsibility. One last point, Sandeep, I want to make is this. A healthy economy is the surest safeguard against loans becoming non-performing assets. When the economy is healthy, people are able to pay back the loans they take. When you create a restrictive, tax terrorism heavy environment where every businessman has to constantly look over their shoulder while at the same time taxing them, I don't understand how you can be surprised. They are going bad because of your poor macroeconomic policies. The fact is, they are turning into bad loans on your watch. That is something that Zafar Islam fails to understand. It is an easy excuse to say UPA, but that will not exonerate you in the days to come.
Okay, fair enough. Point taken. Let me take it to Hemendra Hazari then. Hemendra Hazari, the consensus view, if you look at most brokerage reports, in reaction to the RBI, Maithili is in a minority, so recently is a market, even though stocks have been hammered. But the consensus view among the so-called expert community is that these new bad loan resolution framework is positive for banks in the long run, as it will prevent future evergreening of loans. Do you buy that argument?
As a member of that profession, let me assure you that they've always been very optimistic, and the key word is in the long run. They're always extremely optimistic in the long run, but we today live in the short run. And if you see the commentary when all these restructuring schemes came about, the response of the broking community was very similar, that these would be the magic wands that would cure all ills. So, I mean, to take this expert committee, unfortunately, which I'm a member of, and to, appear that they are the real wise people, from what I've seen of the past, is that, you should not really give them much credibility. Now, the issue today is, and this whole system of having this IBC and putting everything to the NCLT, is that there is this twin balance sheet problem, which is that the banks, balance sheets are constrained and corporate India balance sheets are constrained. And if you clean up this problem, you will get a recovery in the Indian economy. Now, to me, I believe this economic argument, which has been promulgated really by Arvind Subramaniam, has to be challenged. Because in my view, even if it cleans up the bank balance sheets and the corporate India's balance sheets, you will not get growth. Because today there are a lot of corporates who are under leveraged, but they are not expanding capacity for the very simple reason that there is no demand. So even if you have a clean balance sheet, it does not mean that they're going to expand the investments, because they really do not see the demand, and therefore they're not expanding capacity. Today, the capacity utilization in the Indian economy is some 71 or 72% as documented by the RBI. So you require a massive increase in the fiscal deficit. But unfortunately, neither does the government in power, nor the opposition, nor the capital market analysts or business editors, want this to happen, because you want a constrained fiscal deficit, and for you, that's very good financial management. Now, in such a system, even if you clean up both balance sheets, you're not going to get growth, and that is why, this is what I have been arguing for, but I'm in the minority on this.
Okay, we have two panelists who are in the minority. Always makes for a good discussion, doesn't it? Anand Narayan, I reckon your view will be more in line with what the quote-unquote street view is. But, help us understand, why do you believe that these, what appear to be strict, some may call onerous rules as far as NPA management is concerned, why do you believe it's not going to, hit risk-taking by banks? Just the other day we had SBI chairman come on our channel and say that he believes they're going to be very cautious when it comes to giving loans, and they believe credit growth will go only at about 1 or 2% for India's largest lender. So don't you believe that this could, in a sense, stymie capital flow into productive sectors of the economy?
Sandeep, first, the NPA problem in Indian banks is Indian banking's worst kept secret. Many, many years ago, there have been plenty of analyst reports which have come out and said the size of the NPA problem in India is extremely large, much larger than actually declared. Even today, as of the Financial Stability Report of December, as of September 30th, we have what, 12.2% of stressed assets, that is gross NPAs plus restructured assets. We've seen enough number of reports which say that the true NPA size is 16%. Now, we've had no way of figuring out what is right and where is the actual reality, but we've always had these whispers that, you have too much of evergreening happening. In fact, even the RBI has referred to cases where there's been evergreening and they've caught specific instances. We've also had cases where, loans are restructured, taking advantage of certain leeway given by the RBI or forbearance given by the RBI, and the can is kicked down the road. We'll get to see the doodh ka doodh, pani ka pani when we figure out how many of the restructured assets actually are NPAs in hiding, right? So one way of restoring credibility to the system is not having these alternative facts coming to you saying it's actually 16% when your actual official records are saying 12%. Let's bring credibility to the system and show numbers as they are. Now, it's going to be bitter medicine, it's going to be unwelcome news, but frankly, the investor community, the intelligent investor community will not be surprised by a rise in NPAs. But it brings back to the next problem that you raised, saying what happens going forward. Fine, we declare 14% as a real number, not 12%. Now what? Now, there is where the entire NCLT process is going to be tested. It's not enough recapitalizing banks. It's not enough recognizing the size of the problem. What you also have to do is that you can actually resolve the problems and move on, whichever way you do it. Maybe you give it to a new owner at a better price who then starts to run it better, and then, life goes on as ever. Now, that process hasn't been tested. And that is where I guess my concerns personally would be. If it ends up, as Maithili was hinting, if it ends up being a dumping ground for every single asset, and it becomes a bottleneck where things go in and never come out, and resolutions don't happen, then we have a problem. But I wouldn't blame the RBI. I don't think RBI is pushing every asset into NCLT. Remember, there is a proper waterfall before an asset actually reaches NCLT, and banks and the promoters are given ample resolution processes and ample amount of time to show resolution before it's pushed into NCLT. But I do agree that the actual proof of the pudding is going to be in the NCLT eating, and we haven't seen that being tested as yet now.
Tell you what, this is a fascinating debate. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, we will talk about the NCLT test. We'll also talk about the fact that these new norms essentially could lead to additional NPAs to the tune of 2 lakh crore rupees. So who's going to recapitalize these banks now? Where is the capital going to come from? Is the government going to turn to taxpayers' money yet again to recapitalize these banks? All of that and more is what we're going to debate in just a few minutes from now. Do stay with us. We're back in a moment on the India Development Debate. With ET now. This is the India Development Debate, and tonight we're putting the spotlight on the NPA mess, the NPA fix, call it what you want to. Maithili, react to the point made by Anand Narayan, and simple question, how long will we keep kicking the can down the road, which is what we've essentially been doing? SDR, S4A, CDR, all these provisions were doing just that. They just, in a sense, now it appears, gave lenders an excuse to delay bad loan recognition. So how long can we keep kicking the can down the road?
Yes, one cannot do it indefinitely, but let me just come back to a point that Anand raised. He spoke about true NPAs, and I want to make it very clear that there is no such thing as a true NPA. A non-performing asset is defined by the central bank in different ways, and the definition varies across countries. And the Bank for International Settlements, which is a uniform body as it were, which sets the standards across the world, calls NPAs as 90 days. One is overdue. The Reserve Bank of India has now tightened NPAs to make it just 30 days. So there's no such number as a true NPA. When we started with talking about non-performing assets way back in 1992, a non-performing asset was overdue for 4 quarters, past due. So whereas we have been tightening the definition of NPA over a period of time, and that is why the figure has increased. So NPA, as I said, is a subjective definition which varies across countries. So there is no true NPA. The number will vary depending on how the central bank or the regulator decides to define NPAs for the benefit of the banks. Yes, you have said, you're right, we tried many methods of trying to nurse the various sick accounts, and they have not worked. But Sandeep, you must also look at it. Look at the situation under which the banks were functioning. We had just come out of the world after the Lehman Brothers crisis. We've gone through one of the worst global financial crises, added to the fact that we had coal auction cancellations, spectrum auction cancellations. Now, you've just seen what's happened in the case of Goa, where the mining auctions have been cancelled. So what do you do where a company sets up a power plant assuming that it has a coal block allocation? Then for a variety of reasons, whether it's a Supreme Court or whatever, that coal block allocation is cancelled. Where does a power plant go for its coal? So one must understand that circumstances change, and ultimately if you tell the borrower and leave it to the borrower and the lender, and that the lender has his tail on fire because ultimately he has to get the money back. When a lender lends to a borrower, he doesn't intend to write it off, nor does he want it to become an NPA. So I think we're mixing up things and assuming that you're pushing the can down the road. You have to leave it to the lender, to his best judgment, and then if he repeatedly fails or if there's mala fide, then you have to fix him. But today we're looking at all in a bureaucratic manner. The Reserve Bank says 180 days period. If within 180 days your resolution doesn't work, and for some strange reason the Reserve Bank of India has enormous faith in credit rating agencies. Look at the track record of rating agencies. I mean, world over, they're perhaps the most discredited element in the entire financial sector. So I really cannot understand this we cannot look at it in black and white. There are different shades of grey, and each bank must be allowed to make its own judgment call and held accountable where there is malified intent or fraud.
Okay, fair enough. Strong view there of Maithili. But Hemendra Hazani, do you have any estimate on how much stressed assets could now get recognized as NPA in light of these new guidelines? Because to that extent, I know Anand Narayan pointed out that the market is going to be fine with a bloated NPA figure because it indicates that there's better recognition happening. But do we have a sense of how much could it be? I mean, we've got figures of 2 lakh crores, 3 lakh crores. What's your own sense of how much stress assets could now get recognized in light of these new norms?
Well, for that you just have to throw a dart, because I don't think anyone has such a figure or even a guess estimate which will, come close to that number. My only point is this, that every boom has a bust, and we have to pay for that bust. Now, globally also you have banking crisis. The way out of that is that you have to recapitalize, you have to massively increase the fiscal deficit to bail out the banking sector. Now, if you go through with these norms, you can be rest assured there are going to be much larger losses that are going to come on the banking sector. And the current kind of recap that the government has announced is going to be totally inadequate. So I have no issue that if you have a boom, there is going to be a bust and the citizens of the country have to pay for that bust. But for that, you have to expand the fiscal deficit. You have to create additional demand. Now, what we are seeing today is that, my fear is that you'll have a system whereby banks will be, showing huge losses. The government, as usual, is going to wake up very late to recapitalize. And then there's going to be panic on the streets where every person, today also there's a lot of concern among depositors that is my deposit safe in a sovereign-owned bank? Now, that's such a ridiculous perception to have in an economy where the depositor is wondering whether in a government-owned bank he'll get his money back. Now, these are the problems. So, when you're expecting huge losses, you should obviously have a huge, equity expansion planned and announced. So, I have no problem of whatever the number comes out in the NPA, but the government should match it by through a recap. Now, what we have seen from both the Congress and the BJP is they're extremely miserly when it comes to recapitalizing their bank.
Anand Narayan, coming to you first, and we spoke about the NCLT test. And do these strict timelines now mean that larger number of accounts will go into insolvency? Is that a given now, because this 180-day deadline that Maithili spoke about means that a lot of the cases are going to get pushed into the insolvency process? They're going to be out of the normal resolution process.
Yeah, Sandeep, before that, just one quick clarification. Maithili, I respect her. She could be right, but my own understanding is RBI has not changed the 90-day norm for NPA recognition. What it has done is, and it always was there, you recognize a default on the day a default happens. You do reporting more frequently now, weekly, monthly, etc. But the actual NPA recognition happens after 90 days. That's my understanding. I could be wrong, but I just want to leave it there for your viewers. You're absolutely right as far as the NCLT process is concerned, Sandeep. One of the fears that we have, and we'll come to know as we go along. Look, the RBI has given leeway in terms of 180 days, in terms of having a resolution plan which is worked out with all stakeholders, giving every stakeholder, including the promoter, ample time to try and regularize business to the extent possible under a variety of, and it's left a lot of leeway, by the way, on how you actually structure the plan. But it is quite possible that a lot of the assets actually spill over to the 180 days, in which case you will see a long queue standing up at NCLT, and that could trigger, as I said earlier, a bottleneck at the NCLT process. Now, I'm hoping to be proved wrong. We know that the 12 large cases are being discussed at NCLT right now, and there's talk of some bids coming through, etc. Hopefully, we see some resolutions coming in quickly, in which case maybe the NCLT process is not like the old processes and there's something different about this and we actually see resolutions. But yeah, we could see a lot of cases going to NCLT. On hazarding a guess, and throwing a dart, as Mr. Hazarika mentioned, I think there are two areas which the markets will be watching for very, very closely. One is there's always been the suspicion that, some accounts magically become from SMA2 in the 90th day bucket suddenly get some money somewhere and avoid being classified as NPA.
Okay.
There's a whole chunk, I'm told, close to about 3 lakh crores, which is lying in the SMA2 bucket, which could be a candidate for, classification as NPA, which we'll come to see soon enough.
Okay.
The other big chunk is the restructured assets,
sure.
which is about 2% of the gross assets of banks. Again, we'll have to see if that comes into the picture as gross NPA.
Okay, fair enough. I've got exactly a minute on the show. 30 seconds to you, Mohammad Khan, to complete your point, and then I'm going to Maitri for the last word. Mohammad Khan, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Sandeep. 30 seconds, more than enough. Coming back to the point Ms. Maitri was talking about, the root cause is poor, clumsy, confused governance vision. I'll give you an example. Yogi Adityanath comes to power in UP, cancels all the power purchase agreements, all of them, doesn't leave a single one. What do these people do? How do they pay back the loans to the banks? They are not even compensated. Their bank guarantees are forfeited by the UP government. This is currently in litigation. I have one last question for Zafar Islam and his colleagues and his masters. It is this. Please tell us how many of these loans which have shot up as NPAs in the last 2 years were given after 2014? It is a very simple question. The fact that you do not disclose this data compels me to believe that this is economic mismanagement on your part. And finally this, look, you have to acknowledge the economy is going through a terrible period, largely due to
Mr. Khan, all the loans
you need to correct this.
Otherwise, were given prior to 2014 for your information.
Right, that's a fair point. Mohammad Khan and Zafar Islam, I take that point. I don't want to make this a political face-off. I have to go to Maitri. I have to go to Mohammad Khan. I gave you the 30 seconds. I got a rebuttal from Zafar Islam. Maitri, last question on the fact that this will lead to a rush of cases in the insolvency courts and they will rise rapidly. It's a given, like Anand pointed out as well. Do we have enough capacity to deal with it? We've still not seen one resolution come out through the insolvency mechanism. Do we have the capacity to deal with these many cases?
I'm afraid not, Sandeep, and it's a very complex problem. A number of factors have contributed to this, but the irony is that the Reserve Bank of India, which is supposed to be the regulator, supervisor, and responsible for the health of the banking system, is the one who's nailing the final nail in the coffin. It is finally hammering it into the banks and ensuring that banks in India, especially public sector banks, are dead once and for all. And that really is the irony of the entire situation. Complex situation in the center of the Reserve Bank trying to make the banks healthy is actually making their position far worse.
Indeed, completely timed out. I do want to thank this wonderful panel, Hemendra Hazari, Anant Narayan, Maitri Busturmat, Syed Zafar Islam and Mohammad Khan for joining us and trying to analyze the state of banks and the NPA mess. I can tell you what, even in this discussion and even beyond, there are plenty of people to blame for the NPA mess. You could blame the UPA, you could blame the NDA, you could blame bank chairman, you could blame PSU Bank officials, you could blame crony capitalists. You can even blame business media, like Hemendra pointed out. You can keep blaming things. The problem is we just don't seem to be able to arrive at a good structured solution. CDR, SDR, S4A, and now a new mechanism by the central bank, recapitalizing PSU banks. Everything is being tried. We still don't know if the worst is behind us or not. And that is the worrying factor. Completely timed out of this edition of the India Development Debate. Keep it with ET Now.